Coming up tonight on Faith versus Culture, being faithful to your spouse doesn't mean just being physically faithful. We're going to dive into the implications of that. Plus, a mega church pastor in Washington, D.C. has taken a sudden sabbatical, and we'll explain the reason why and break that down on Faith versus Culture.
Having sex before you're married is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
There are problems of sin and habit that cannot be solved outside the person of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Faith versus Culture. I am faithwire.com managing editor Dan Andros, joined as always by author, pastor Dale Partridge. Dale, what's going on?
Hey man, I am on location here in Moscow, Idaho, and we're just meeting up with some ministry friends and having some good discussions about Jesus. And I'm in an office with some cement floors, so it's a little bit echoey, but hey, you know, we got to get the show done. Excited to have some good conversation.
Moscow, Idaho. I mean, I know the guys you're with out there, and like when I heard they were from Moscow, Idaho, I've never been to Idaho, so all I picture are just like mountains and just vast expanses. I picture Ansel Adams. I mean, that's pretty much all I picture. Black and white Ansel Adams pictures. So, yeah, interested to hear what comes out of that visit up there.
Yeah, you know, it's basically we're meeting up here with Doug Wilson's family, and I'm actually having some dinner or drinks tonight with the folks from Cross Politic. And there's just a really great community of I would say, conservative theologians and people who are really trying to honor the Lord in their relationships in church, in their politics. And it's been a fantastic time. And one thing I've learned is when you live here, they call it Moscow, not Moscow. And you know, it's one of those things like Lancaster, Pennsylvania, right, instead of Lancaster. And so it's just one of those things. But yeah, it's a beautiful spot up here in northern Idaho. We live in Oregon, so it was only about a 6-hour drive. But yeah, we're excited to be here and excited to do the show today. Awesome, yeah. And Pastor Toby over there and Pastor Doug as well were both featured on our Set Free course. And they're just fantastic insights into the gospel. And honestly, one of my favorite videos of all time, Dale, is Pastor Doug's series of debates and conversations he had with the late Christopher Hitchens. And they're all on YouTube where you can find them. I think there's like a mini documentary that was shot while they were, cameras followed them around while they kind of toured around together, because they believe they did a book together. And, it's really fascinating conversation because, Hitchens is a obviously famous atheist, but, brilliant guy, like really, really articulate, lays out positions well, but Doug, he handles them in such a way that it's like nothing I've ever seen before. So it's great stuff. So anyway, praying for your time up there. But for tonight, Dale, we wanted to focus in on a post you had, and look, I just think this is something we know as Christians. Like, we know that if you think and you in your mind you're unfaithful, that it also is a sin as well. We can say that, but I think it's worth zeroing in on for a little bit here, because it's in our culture right now with so much digital access and things and Instagram and TV and just the imagery that's pushed on us so many times. I think it's worth just talking about it, because we know the numbers at this point, Dale, on porn and everything else. And so we know this is something that's just not an issue that's going away anytime soon, unfortunately. So thought it'd be worth spending a few minutes on. Let me read your post here, and then you can jump off on just kind of what you were thinking and maybe expand on it a little bit. So you wrote, Sure.
Being faithful to your spouse doesn't mean that you're just physically monogamous. It also means you're emotionally and mentally monogamous. Having an emotional affair or mental fantasy about another person is still adultery, just not of the body, but of the heart. That's from Matthew 5:27-28. And you said to the married, what begins in the head often ends in the bed. So wise words there, Dale, but why don't we just dive into that and break it down a bit?
Yeah, so it's a good point. And, we have such a problem in today's culture with the pornography issue. We do have a mental adultery and an emotional adultery happening all the time around us. And it is that verse from Matthew. Jesus is saying, hey, you've heard that it was said of those of old in the Old Testament, you shall not commit adultery. But he says, I shall say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now, this is different than physical adultery, but this is adultery of the heart. And Jesus really takes us back and says, hey, the root of all this stuff begins in the heart. And I think a lot of men especially think that this is impossible to overcome, this kind of lustful mentality. I will say from my own experience, while we're still walking in a fleshly body, but we do have the capacity and the ability through the power of the Holy Spirit to walk in the Spirit, and we will not fulfill the desires of the flesh. And it really does come down to controlling your eyes, because your eyes really are the shield or the guard of your heart. And so making sure that you're not putting yourself in a position, I knew a guy a long time ago who was getting over a pornography addiction, and it wasn't good for him to go down to the Southern California beaches that we lived nearby, because it was just, half naked women all the time. And it's one of those things that he was guarding his heart by guarding his eyes. And I think that's a part of this process, but we sometimes think, hey, you know what, if I just think about it, it's not the same as doing it. But again, Jesus came in hard on that and said, no, it is the same thing. And it is still sin. And regardless if your wife or your spouse knows about it, I know about it, is what Jesus is saying. And it's committing sin of the heart. And God, it says in the Old Testament that man looks on the outside, but the Lord looks at the heart. And so we got to remember that while nobody might be watching physically, and we might not actually be committing physical sin with our bodies, that adultery begins in the head before it ends up in the bed. And so it's just a process. If you're willing to cheat with your mind, it's just the right opportunity that'll give you the opportunity to cheat with your body. And I found that to be true in many of my marriage counseling and coaching stories that I've had over the years, is that people that if you're willing to continuously cheat mentally and emotionally and with your eyes, it really isn't that far before it ends up in a physical relationship.
Yeah, and there's a great sermon, and our editor Dan's gonna shoot me because he keeps sending this thing to me, and I keep forgetting the guy's name, who's the pastor in it. But there's a fabulous sermon. We're gonna put it in the comments sections when we post it and all that. I'll once I get the link. But it really breaks down what you just touched on, Dale, which is that mentality that a lot of people have, a lot of Christians have, where it's not that bad if I just think something, or if I have that mental thought. But he sort of really breaks down and dives into what the problem with that is specifically, and goes on to explain far better than I will sum it up here, that when we're looking, like, let's say you don't avert your eyes and you see, a pretty woman walking down the street, and then you go and then you look back and you kind of, sort of feed that fantasy, you create the film strip in your mind, that sort of a thing. When you entertain your brain, entertain your mind, not only is that just lustful, that sin, because like you were saying, you're lusting after them, you're violating that person. That person was made in the imago Dei, the image of God, and you're taking them and doing something that they have not given you permission to do. And so while, yes, it's in your mind, you are still in a way violating them, because you're using them for your own gratification. So it's not some harmless a sin that is just only you and you're only doing it. I mean, a lot of people justify it that way, but again, watch that sermon, because it really breaks it down and describes about how it's not the victimless sin, so to speak, as we often hear about.
Yeah, I mean, we really want to extract the human element from these mental thoughts, as if, the imagination of those things is our right, and there is no, morality doesn't reach into the mind and into the emotions. It really is the starting point for these things. And so, we don't do anything physically that doesn't start in the mind and in the heart. And so it really is something to guard. It's something to be careful about, and it's something to hold in high honor. And imagine if someone was doing that to your daughter, or if someone was doing that to your wife, or someone was doing that to your mother. And so, I'm speaking obviously to the men here, but these are really important perspectives to have and to hold. And again, remembering what it says in Galatians, that if we walk in the Spirit, we're not going to fulfill the desires of the flesh. And the key here is to control our behaviors by walking according to the Scriptures.
Yeah, and I think that's why, Dale, it's important that we just revisited it and went over it today, because we can't be reminded enough times in a digital age where we're staring at our screens, 90% of the day, some people, and getting bombarded with these images, that we need that reminder that, the Spirit's got to convict us here. And so we need to be diving back into the Word and walking close to Him to remember that, yes, indeed, this is a problem. This is not okay. And, you can't have one foot in the world and one foot out of it, and still be walking right with God. So good stuff to break down there, Dale. Good post there on Instagram. And we're going to come back on the other side of the break. This is Faith versus Culture on the CBN News Channel. Back in a sec.
Region's first ROTC graduate student.
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike Roizen, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to CBN.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to CBN.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
All right, welcome back. This is Faith versus Culture. Dan Andros here. Dale Partridge coming to us from Moscow, Idaho, today. So, all right, wanted to hit another topic here, Dale. This is a key one, and I know some churches are okay and are kind of pushing the envelope on this. And look, we're in a culture that sort of values busyness, right? The busier we are, the more we're doing, and the more effective we're being. And the Lord says to work 6 days a week, and we just keep on plowing through and don't worry about what else is going on. And for pastors, especially, that can be a problem because they're always on call. I mean, you see your pastor on Sunday, and they're out there the rest of the week, not only working on stuff for Sunday, but they're visiting the flock. They're helping people. They're in crisis situations. They're doing funerals. They're doing marriages. They're doing all these things all the time. And so that's a huge weight. But at some point, you've got to be filling your bucket, not just emptying it all out. So Dale, we have this pastor here in Washington, D.C., and his name is Howard John Wesley. And he made the honest admission that, quote, "I'm tired in my soul." And so he's going to go on a bit of a sabbatical here to sort of try to, get himself cleansed, get himself right, and hopefully rest up. So what do you make of this decision, Dale? It's, I think, I don't know, he's going to be gone for a couple months, maybe the first quarter or something like that. Just to rest and read and do whatever he does to unwind. So what do you think about that?
I think it's a fantastic decision. I think it's mature. I think that it's where the church needs to go. We don't realize that, the role of the pastor is designed to burn out the human body. You're dealing with not just sermon prep or operational capacity. You're also dealing with just the hardest and most difficult emotional tragedies, difficult counseling discussions, relational tensions all the time, critique that you're getting. Often people are frustrated that your sermon didn't say this and it should have said that, or that you have eyes on you at all points of the time. There's just a lot of intensity that goes along. Now, that's not even counting the spiritual realm in terms of the spiritual attack that comes with pastors. As you guys know, many pastors have had children who have died. You have many pastors who have had tragedies and moral failures. There's just a lot, because when you can take out, if you're looking at this as a warfare tactic and you look at like the enemy is trying to take out, if you take out the shepherd, man, the sheep scatter. And so the shepherds, these local shepherds, are under attack all the time. And so, I think that there's some good, it says to be a qualified pastor according to Scripture. You would turn to 1 Timothy chapter 3 and also Titus 1. But one of them, it says that an elder must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded is a key thing here. And so when we get burnt out, it's hard for us to be sober-minded, right? We get anxious, we get worried, we get angry, we get overwhelmed. It says that we're not actually greedy, we're not violent. And those kind of things, when you start recognizing, you know what? I've had maybe too much of an operational relationship with God or an academic relationship with God. I need to get back to the roots of a devotional relationship with God. And I think that is sometimes what pastors need. And I think churches need to be far more vigilant and concerned about this, because instead of pushing their pastors to the limit over and over, helping them really find that time for rest and helping them know that, hey, you know what, you guys can take a break. You can take a 3-month sabbatical and we'll keep you paid. You need to go get that rest so you can continue serving here at this church. And that really is what it is, because pastoring is serving, it's laboring, it's sacrificing. So I just have a heart for this, and I really do think it's a wise decision. And all churches should be examining ways to let the pastor have the freedom to go, hey, you know what, guys, I am just toast. I need a time off. Or maybe it's some sort of pattern that really helps set the pace at a more sustainable pace of going, hey, we're going to go 6 weeks on and then 1 week off, and 6 weeks on and 1 week off. Whatever it takes to really help these shepherds continue to maintain their strength so that they can do the work in the kingdom that they're called to do. And that's so important for the church.
All right, it's great stuff, Dale. Thank you. And when we come back on the other side of the break, Time chose its person of the year. We have an alternative choice here. I'm gonna put this before you, Dale, to see if you think Time's person that they selected versus this Christian who maybe could have had it. Let's see if you think this person should have won this honor when we come back on the other side of the break. This is Faith versus Culture.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire, Monday night at 9:30. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Watch The Global Lane, Thursday night at 9:30.
All right, welcome back. Faith versus culture. So Time last week chose its person of the year. There's always been some controversy with this selection. Sometimes it's silly and ridiculous. Sometimes it's, a group. And sometimes it's, Hitler got it back in 1938. Mussolini got it twice, Stalin got it 2 times. So a lot of controversy at times with this award, but this year it went to the 16-year-old climate activist, Greta Thunberg, or whatever her name is. So I was just thinking, Dale, if Time and mainstream media in general actually valued influencing souls for Christ as like a virtue, as much as they do climate change advocacy, then maybe they would have included this person on their list. And that is, of course, Kanye West. What do you think, Dale? You think they would have ever gone for that?
Yeah, I don't think Time in the secular, narrative that they live in would. But I think that, if we were looking at it under the context of which you described, I say absolutely, because, man, this year, what a wild year. I saw a headline also, that someone put out that Kanye West is replacing John Crist at Christian Youth Conference. And I thought, man, if I saw that 2 years ago, I would think this is, a parody account. But this is, I think it's a valid option and choice. He's probably the most influential Christian on earth in terms of reach and understanding and how many people are paying attention and how many people listen to that album. And so, I think it's absolutely worth a consideration in that kind of imaginary context there for sure.
Yeah, I used to always kind of joke with my colleagues in a not really a jokey way because I believe this, but this was before Kanye, but Justin Bieber was sort of really saying a lot of faithy things, and like from what I could tell, it seemed solid. Now he was kind of a little more cryptic, just kind of short bursts than what Kanye is doing now. But I would kind of say, I had this prediction that I think somebody like Justin Bieber is going to be like the next Billy Graham in 20 years. Like, we're going to forget that he was a singer and he's out there doing tent revivals and stuff. And then Kanye comes along and he's like literally doing it. So forget the 20 years and maybe Justin Bieber's not next in line. Maybe it was Kanye that kind of fulfilled that little prediction that I had. But when you look at it in the context of Time magazine, the reason why I brought it up is because Billy Graham was going around with tents and preaching. Kanye's doing it a little differently with the Sunday service choir and, getting other pastors to come in and sort of do the preaching, but very similar thing. It's like the modern day hipster tent revival from the 50s with Billy Graham. So I mean, we'll see if the trend continues, as we said, but that's certainly influential. And, you know, unfortunately, the mainstream media, as we know, doesn't really value people becoming Christians as something important. But we do at FaithWire, and we do at CBN, and Christian outlets actually care. So that's why you should be reading, by the way, and supporting Christian outlets as much as possible, because we actually care about those things when we see them, whereas these other outlets don't. So, all right. Anyway, anyway, we're going to wrap this up on the other side of the break. Dale, thank you for joining us on location there in Idaho. And we will see you next time. And we got one more segment to wrap it up here on Faith versus Culture. Back in a second.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
On the home front, Tuesday morning at 10:30.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government.
My focus has been trying to really make sure we have the future leaders we need for the bench and the bar and for society generally.
You'll learn from highly credentialed leaders who are current and former judges, distinguished scholars, and ACLJ counsel.
I'm so glad I chose Regent. The relationships here have been amazing. The faculty have been amazing. Not everybody's called to the same thing when they leave law school, but they're called by a God who has a purpose for their lives, and He is going to use that education to make a difference in the world.
Regent will prepare you to be a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer. To start your rewarding law career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July. Apply today.
All right, that's all the time we have left for today's episode of Faith versus Culture. Thanks for checking it out. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to see all the other episodes we have up, just head on over to cbnnewschannel.com. All the episodes are up there. They're also on our Facebook page, and that is facebook.com/faithwirenews. Check out the video section and go scrolling through there. They're all up there. Check out all the past episodes. You can always email us with any questions, comments, complaints, whatever else you want to do. And that is contact@faithwire.com. Thank you again for watching. Thanks for tuning in to the CBN News Channel. And we will see you next time. God bless and have a great week.